South Africa became incredibly dangerous. Got held up at a friend's house, like gun put in my mouth and my life threatened. Been in a supermarket and they've come in with AK-47s, like literally blowing like the place up, and gun shells all are falling all around me. My immune system had been depleted and I ended up getting what's called shingles. It's incredibly painful, like it attacks your nervous system, you break out in like rashes. At the same time, like I ended up getting Hashimoto's disease, like my thyroid started attacking itself. Why are you doing this to yourself? Like it's absolutely meaningless, and you have a little 4-year-old son, you have a wife. Yeah, I recorded like a few years back, I went and did a documentary in South Africa. And at the time I was working at a company called Hotjar, and they gave sort of like €1,000. If you did a referral, they gave you €1,000, and then they gave you €1,000 to spend on charity. And I'd referred like 3 or 4 people. So I had a little bit of money and I went down to South Africa and did a documentary on surfers, not street children, which is a really cool charity in South Africa. And basically what they do is they take kids off the street, and then instead of just putting them into homes and straight into schools, which normally they just jump back straight onto the street because they don't like the discipline and structure, they try to get them into the sport of surfing, and then slowly like reintroduce them into different environments. And it was really cool. I felt like it was amazing work, and then I got back and the audio was like absolute crap. Like it was just, you could hear the waves in the background, you could hardly hear the guy talking, and I was just like, such a rookie mistake. I was so disappointed, but anyway, we fixed it in the end and it turned out pretty decent.
I've done that mistake so many times that that's why everything. Well, thank you for joining me for this conversation. We literally just met a couple of hours ago on the SaaS Talk expo floor. I really liked how you interviewed Andrew from Pado. Really good stuff. Would be good to start with an intro. Talk a bit about who you are and the elevator pitch of what you're currently doing, whether you want that to be Churn FM or something else.
Yeah, nice. Feel free. So, I mean, at my heart, I'm a startup founder. I founded several different companies over the years. I've sold 2, but for peanuts. Churn and retention was the issue with those companies. But ultimately, at some point, I joined a company called Hotjar, Analytics and Feedback. David Dominan at the time was an advisor to my previous company that we had just sold. And he said, sort of, why not come to Hotjar, see how things have been done, and when you're ready, you can get started again. And then at some point in that journey, I decided I wanted to start a new company. Just wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet. And I said, okay, let me build an audience first, and then when I'm ready, I can get started again. And I chose churn and retention because it's something that had plagued me in my past. I was also ironically put in charge of a team at Hotjar called the Churn team, which very bad idea, but a lot of good lessons learned. And I decided if you ask any CEO what they'd be willing to pay to solve for the problem, they'd say probably whatever's in the bank because it's going to pay back in compounding interest. And that sort of set me on the journey. And currently today, in that time as well, I actually launched a business, venture-backed, shut it down recently. And the audience for Churn FM has grown over the last 3 to 4 years, but really like on the side and not really investing much time in it. And now I've decided actually, since it's been an asset that's been growing, I'm going to give it some focus while I figure out what I want to do next now and what company I'm going to start again in the future. Awesome.
And so you said, just to make sure that I understand, you said that Churn FM was part of your previous business.
No. So Churn FM, I just started it because I wanted to start a business. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet. So I said, okay, let me build the audience first and then figure out what I'm going to sell in the meantime. And then it ended up that the product I ended up building wasn't really a good fit for the audience per se. But what ended up happening, like all through the journey of building the podcast, people would say to me like, why are you doing this? Like, how are you monetizing? Why are you wasting your time? I'd be like, it's not about that. It's about building the audience and it's about creating connections. And actually what ended up happening was when I went out to raise capital for the business that I had founded, 6 of my 7 investors were guests on the show. And I raised the pre-seed round in about a week where we raised around $800,000. And it really just was extremely simple as opposed to previous startups where maybe it took me months, even years to raise capital for those businesses. The network that had been created through the podcast almost like paid for itself in its way. And if you think about a monetization platform, like it's unbelievable from that perspective. And now starting for the first time to actually monetize it through advertisers and working with different partners.
That's, when I hear these kind of stories, it just motivates me. And it helps me continue to spread the same type of message, because I do believe that having a strong network is important. There's this cheesy saying, but it's completely true. Your network is your net worth, right? So it's amazing to hear that you raise money from your network. When we raised our seed investment round for Jigsaw, it was the same thing. We raised from someone in our network that we met before, we had conversations, and it just happened. We didn't even reach out to this individual. I had a random conversation, and like, oh, what are we up to? Oh, I'm raising money, so I moved to this city. Actually, I'm looking to invest in companies. So it's a pretty cool thing. What's your audience size currently for Churn FM?
Yeah, we're somewhere around 10,000 monthly listeners now at the moment, and planning to increase that as well. Obviously, now being this a full-time focus, we've up until now been about 1 episode per week, and going to start to increase that. Have a very big backlog now that's actually starting to stress me out. So probably going to start introducing like 2 to 3 episodes a week as well.
Oh, wow. That's impressing. Yeah. Honestly, impressing. Because like I'm doing these podcasts, I've now decided to do it twice a month.
Yeah.
And I was thinking whether to publish the SaaS Talk sessions into weekly. And it's a bit daunting to think about doing it weekly. Yeah. So I'm thinking, well, I do have a backlog of founders and guests, but what if I run out of it? Then it's going to be a full-time job to find guests. How do you manage it?
There is that side. I would also say, though, the level of production and the quality, like because we're surrounded by 3 cameras, you record different recording devices. I think there's a lot more that probably goes into your production and your workflow than what I have set up. But the guests, actually, in the beginning, I was very fortunate that I'd worked with some really key people that helped sort of that initial like 4 or 5 episodes, some really key great speakers. So we had like Nira Yal in the early days, Brian Belfer. And these were the times when they were like at their peak in their careers as well. Not saying that they're not now. Obviously, they're still, they've gone on to greater successes. But that sort of helped as a catalyst in the beginning. And it made it very easy then as well to say to others, like, hey, we've had these guests on the show. Would love to have you and add you to the list. And then just that credibility ended up becoming easy. And now we're at a point with the podcast where, because it's quite well known in the space and in SaaS specifically, is that a lot of PR teams from companies will pitch and reach out to me and say like, hey, would you be interested in having the guests on the show? Like 9 out of 10, I would say no, because most of the time they're just trying to pitch and sell the things. But because there's so many that come through now, there are really good, decent ones that come every now and again. And actually now what I did this recently was just set up an automation as well. So just like outbound sales team would do, use Apollo, have my ICP of who I really want to be interviewing, putting them through workflows then, and like I might be browsing LinkedIn, I have the Apollo extension open, I'll just add them to the workflow, and then it starts sending them emails and inviting them to the thing. So
that's really cool. That is really cool. Yeah. I've used some automation tools in the past with LinkedIn, but I've not used Apollo. What's the, is it Apollo?
So Apollo is really great. It's like you can basically decide who you're going after, like company size and so forth, and then it gives you their email addresses, and you can create email sequences. So first one is like an invite to the show. You can set up like customization and personalization for the guests as well. And then afterwards, you can set up follow-ups like, hey, what did you think about the invite? So normally I'd send a couple of emails to each guest, and the response rate is pretty high as well. You can also do things like A/B test the copy and things like that. But I don't think for something like a podcast it's as necessary as when you're selling a product.
True. And how do you decide who's a good fit? Because you said out of 10, you reject 9 because they're sales. They might just want to come and sell or something like that.
So I think for me, it's pretty easy to know and understand because of the topic and how niche and focused it is. So Churn FM, we talk about churn and retention in subscription businesses. And it is broader at the same time. So I do speak to people in marketing and growth and customer success in sales. But generally, obviously, first of all, like, are they a successful SaaS business? Are they in a role or have experience that's had direct relations with working on churn and retention in their business? And that's it, basically. That's the filter. So it's quite easy for me to identify and know companies. And I've done over 250 interviews now of the show. So also you speak to other guests, you hear stories. Who else should I be speaking to, and get referrals that way as well.
That makes sense. And right. So it does sound like you're pretty much going at it the same way that I am, and thinking about it the same way that I am, because I've said, even once we got acquired and such, I said I want to help as many people as possible with content and build an audience, build a network of people that are interested in following this type of content, and opportunities will arise from it eventually. I have every single time I talk to someone, either on the podcast or not, everyone asks me, okay, so what's next?
Yeah.
And in my mind, this is it for now. Like it is very fulfilling for me what I'm doing. And I don't need to, at the moment, to rush into anything and try to figure out how to monetize, how to do this, how to do that. And it's going to come eventually. But I think there's this pressure once you exit a business and you're still young, right? There's this societal pressure of, okay, so what's your next big thing?
Yeah.
Right? And it kind of saddens me to know that there's people out there that potentially look at people after a big thing going and doing something that they love, and because it's not classified in society as the next step, you see it as a downgrade.
Yeah.
Right? Which I'm like, no, it's not. I'm able to do what I love and help a lot of people and have an impact. That is an upgrade to me than what I was doing previously.
Do you think it's that society look at it and see like what's the next big thing, or because they know and understand like you as an individual and as a person and as a character, like from an entrepreneurial aspect? I think like for me, what I've seen with all my friends and around is that it tends to be sort of an addiction, and like getting started in startups, like it's always like one thing leads to the next. It becomes competitive. It becomes a sport.
Yeah.
And I think for somebody like yourself, it's amazing. Like if you can get fulfillment and you can enjoy it, and at the same time, like really, really enjoy what you're doing, like that's success. Like at the end of the day,
yeah.
I have a very good friend as well who actually invested in the previous startup, and he exited, had a really good exit for his startup, and he's similar in a situation now where it's like everyone's asking him like, hey, what's next? Do you have the itch? Like, what's going on? It's been almost a year now. It's a year and a half now. And like, it's like, I don't have any pressure. Like I have certain topics I'm learning. Like this is what my day looks like. I spend 4 hours looking into this topic. I spend 3 hours looking at this topic. I spend the rest of the time with my family. I'm not in no rush. And I do see from his side the perspective. But for me, like my question to ask him, like what's next, is more like, I know him as a person and as an individual, and I know he's always loves to like be tinkering, building things. Yeah. It's not necessarily like making a bigger success, but it's more just like the character. And I guess, I mean, the amount of effort you're putting into this, it's almost like you're building a startup in its own right as well. Yeah,
I do see a lot of similarities, and probably you do too as you build up and focus now on Churn FM. Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people, because when I get that question, I can immediately read who's asking from a place of, I'm genuinely curious what your next thing is going to be, versus people that have that ingrained expectation that you're going to, you build and exit this business. What's your next business? Are you going to do it bigger? Are you going to get to do a SaaS with a VC, exits, IPOs and things like that?
Yeah.
And in a way, it saddens me, because I think we became complacent around these thoughts because of media, and because that's the trend in general. Once you exited a business, you're expected to go to the next step, right? And so on, because this is what has been promoted online so often. It's like, oh, this person succeeded, like they've sold this business and then they made it bigger and they sold it, and so on.
And then they went all in, and No, I see that. But it's not like you're not doing anything. I mean, come on, you're spending a lot of time what you're doing now as well. So it's, I think for me, it's more that, like when I ask the question to friends and stuff like what's next, it's more like I know their characters and I know they're not the type of people that will enjoy sitting around doing nothing for long periods of time. So
are you the same?
Yes.
Do you have FOMO?
Yes, absolutely. It is real. It is real.
What was the longest period of time that you didn't pick up anything?
Never.
It never existed. You always made yourself busy.
Yeah, I think like now with this company that I've just shut down, because I shut down a startup recently, I probably spent like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I wanted like just to fully reset and refresh. And then I said, okay, I need to get something moving, start working on something. And I think it's a problem. I'm not going to lie. Not being able to relax. But I think also what I really enjoy doing as well is like building and creating. And when I'm not doing that, I find I'm not happy. So it's like, in one aspect, there's a problem where you associate a lot of your identity of who you are to what you do. But it's what I enjoy doing as well. So I'm in a fortunate position that I enjoy the work that I do and I enjoy trying to build and create things. But it can also have like a negative impact on your body. You're told like it took a big impact on me and the previous company. So,
how old are you?
I'm 37.
37. Yeah. Okay, we're kind of the same. We're the same age. I completely agree. And Nikki, my partner, my life partner and co-founder at the previous company, always laughs at me because I tell her, well, we've done this business and we hacked it around and we had crazy sleepless nights and all of this stuff, this crazy startup life. I don't want to do it like that anymore. My next business, I'm going to take it slow. That's just in my head. And I think, I don't know if it's the type of people. Do you reckon that's a trait of startup founders in general, or have you met many startup founders that are also a bit more calculated, a bit more paced, a bit more?
So I've interviewed obviously a lot of people in the space, and I think like recently I was chatting to a couple of friends, one who was actually a co-founder of Hotjar, and we're talking about maybe doing something together, and they were talking about this, like we're going to build it slowly in our time, in speed and pace, and like I honestly don't believe something like that is going to work, like knowing what it takes to get something off the ground and how much competition there is in the market, and like if you're not doing it, somebody else is going to be doing it. And I think also like startups are all about momentum. So if you're not building that momentum and you're taking things more like laid back, I don't see how they can work. But on the flip side, though, I think there is like a very big advantage to experience. So when you start out your startup career, like when I started my first startup, I thought everything was important. Like I would spend day in, day out, like trying to just get everything right and everything perfect and just like spending time on meaningless stuff for the most part as well. And I think as you progress, each time you build a new startup, you get to a better understanding of what's key and what's critical at each stage. And you're able to prioritize a lot better, which then gives you the freedom and flexibility, I think, more. So it's not that you're doing less in the way, but you're doing the things that matter the most. And I think that's maybe the only difference that I see like in some founders that are a lot more experienced is that they're a lot more in control of their time and how they spend their time and the impact that their time has. So I think that's like probably the key difference I've seen between like the earlier stage founders that I speak to a lot and then the later stage more successful founders who are doing it the second or third time round is they have like this obsession with focusing on what really matters at any given time.
Yeah.
And everything else is just like distractions.
I agree with that. I do think that you're still experimenting even. Like I feel that I'm experimenting even now because there's so many areas that I don't know of. But you're right. I think over time as you do more business, because I've in my early 20s and up until 28 or 30 years old, I failed so many startups, never made anything stick. And I think what I took away from it, because I've done so much experimentation, I've tried so many things, I've started learning what works and having that sense of, oh, if I do this is going to give results. So let me focus on these things. But you're still experimenting. There's still areas like I'm looking at this. I love it because I found I went into a direction that I don't know that much about. I know all of the business side of the stuff, so I know how to make things very efficient for myself, for Misfit Founders Ltd, the company that owns this, right? So I know how to make things efficient there. But there's so much experimentation with content, with distribution, with outreach, with a bunch of other things that I've not had that much success or interaction with previously as a SaaS founder.
Yeah, it's a whole new learning curve, I guess, and it's a whole new business, a whole new industry. I think that's also probably what I love about startups is like the learning curve is typically extreme when you join a startup, and I feel I need that to be engaged and to get excited, is to be able to be challenged. And like as soon as things become monotonous and I'm doing the same thing over and over, like that's when I start to tune out. And I think like that's what keeps me going as well, is like this thirst for knowledge in a way. And sometimes like starting in totally different industry or sector, for some it might be like, what the hell are you doing? You're crazy. Like, why are you going to this space? But I think it's also then it's that beginner's mindset. Like I feel there is like some benefit to having the beginner's mindset, and there's obviously a lot of benefit to having experience and founder market fit, as people say. But I like as well coming back to like first principles and challenging some of the things that's what people perceive to be like common ground, the way things should be done, and just trying to think like, how would I approach this from the start? Again, I have zero knowledge in the space, like admitting it, like saying I know nothing, and just trying to learn that way. I think is really interesting. Businesses have been created that way too.
You reckon you'd be interested in scaling a business? So let's say you have a startup that and you decide you're not going to sell it. As in, let's say there's not your decision, but there's external. Would you want to scale it?
To scale.
To experience that, basically.
So, I mean, I was fortunate that I joined Hotjar when there was around 20 people and got to experience like a rapid period of growth. When I left, there was around 120 people, and had the same conversation as well with David at the time, David Domin, who was the CEO. And he also sort of came to a similar realization that he enjoys that 0 to 1 phase, and then he's not the type of person that's going to continue to want to grow. And I think it's difficult to answer that question until you get into that position. The other thing you always used to say to me as well, which I like, it resonates a lot with me, is like, it's incredibly difficult to build a successful business, and then to go on and to give that up at some point is like the chances of you being able to replicate that success again are really, really low. And while you have it, and if you're enjoying it, it's like, keep doing it. And I think that would be for me, like, until I felt the point where like I wasn't learning or I wasn't progressing fast enough to be able to be effective in the business. At that point is when I'd probably say, okay, yes, this is not for me. But I think as you continue to grow, the other thing is like, you think that things get easier, but like in actuality, things just get more difficult and the problems become bigger and they become more complex. And I think that excites me as well at the same time, is that as you continue to grow, you need to face these different challenges, you need to grow and you need to learn as a leader. I think the point where I would get bored and stagnated is where things become too monotonous and too rigid. And I think like most startups, like I've seen this play out, is there's this changing of the guards. And I think it's normally around 80 to 100 people.
Oh, yeah.
Where new leadership comes in, they start forming the C-level, and those that started the company start to get bored. They start to become redundant because they haven't been able to keep up with the rate of progress. And then they start leaving and you start to get this changing of the guards. And I think most startups go through this, and like it's an individual preference. Like, what do you enjoy doing and which stage you enjoy working at? For me, I'm not convinced yet. Like,
yeah, I do. I see companies getting into that stage a lot earlier, even than 800 to 1,000 employees.
Sorry, 80 to 100.
Oh, 80 to 100. Okay. I thought you said 100, 800 to.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Already
yeah.
800 to 1,000.
Yeah. That's very true. How did you start your career?
How did I start my career? Interesting question. I have to think back now. So I think the first, like, I lived in South Africa, and I left South Africa when I was around 18 years old. At the time I wanted to go traveling. I moved to Cyprus, and then I went to London, and my uncle called me. He's like, "Hey Andrew, have a bar in Cyprus. I've been running it for 20 years. I'm tired of it. Like, do you want to come over and run it for me for the summer?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like every 18-year-old's dream to run a bar in Cyprus in the summer.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years, and in between I was doing different odd end jobs. So like I did pretty much every other job under the sun as well. I worked as like a pool boy at a hotel. I worked as a builder laying bricks at some point. Like I drove diggers and installed electricity poles for like the electricity company. I was like testing things out. But then at some point I was like, okay, like I remembered at school I learned how to program, and I wanted to go back to getting into that. And I was lucky a cousin of mine had a real estate agent, and I joined and started building websites for them for their real estate agency. And then decided at some point I wanted to build my first company, which was going to be, it was at the time it was called Mega Mall Cyprus. And this was way back, like almost probably 15 years, maybe more, where you could build your own online store in a matter of minutes, and you could start accepting payments and start selling goods online. And this was like before Shopify became a thing, and it was around the same time when things were launching. So that was sort of like my first dive into SaaS and into software businesses, and learned a lot in the process with that. And at the time I was also like 20 years old. 17 years ago, somewhere there. And that business, like I ended up focusing way too much on the Cyprus market, who was like nowhere nearly advanced as anywhere else in the world, and ended up selling the business to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, who just randomly came to Cyprus on holiday, saw the website, felt that they needed it for their businesses in Canada, and ended up purchasing it from me. Like the most random act.
I was going to say, that's the most random acquisition.
Most random acts. And but I learned a lot through that process as well, like as an early stage, like understanding like what sales meant, like what SaaS. And I think what hooked me was like going to bed one night and then waking up in the morning and there was like 400 euros in the account, and like I'd been sleeping. I was like, this is magic. I need more of this in my life. And then it was just like from then on out, it's like building and tinkering and trying new things.
And what was afterwards, after you sold that business?
Yeah. So after I sold that business, like while I was building that business, actually, I started getting requests from the people I was going to pitch, and they were like, hey, I don't really need to sell online, but I'd like a website, or I'd like some marketing services. And I ended up starting a digital agency in Cyprus. And at this time was when social media started to take off, and we were really like the first social media agency that was doing work in the island, and then joined forces with another digital agency, and we ended up becoming the largest digital agency at the island at some point around social media. And we had all like the clients, all the major like telco brands, all the banks, all the airlines. We were doing the work through there, and I enjoyed that for a bit, but it wasn't really like something that I loved doing, building for others. And one of our clients at the time was actually Shark Energy Drink. I don't know if you're familiar with them, maybe from Romania, but it was a competitor to Red Bull. And we won their account, and we were doing the work for them. And the CEO at the time was like, hey, like, would you want to join us? We're looking for somebody to run digital marketing globally for us and then for the market. So I went and did that for a couple of years, and that's where I met my co-founder for the next startup. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm curious, why did you chose to stay in Cyprus and not go back to South Africa after your summer bartending and stuff?
I think that's an easy one. I think just like South Africa became incredibly dangerous. And I also saw sort of like the path I was going down there wasn't like the future that I wanted to see for myself. And I sort of said, okay, like I don't want to go back to that place, especially when you've been living abroad for so long and like you experience a total different level of freedom. I mean, in South Africa, like everyone's experienced like horrific things. I actually went back on holiday and then got held up at a friend's house, like gun put in my mouth and my life threatened. And
what?
Yeah.
That's great. What part of South Africa are you from?
I grew up in Johannesburg.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely like one
I
of the
heard
more
that area
areas.
is
And
Jesus.
Yeah, it was an experience, and like I
so you're just there on holiday?
Just there on holiday, and like randomly, like sitting in the kitchen 15 minutes before, talking to my friend's mother, telling her how much I loved Cyprus and how safe it was. And I walked outside to talk on the phone, and the car drives into the driveway, and I wave at them like I thought they were lost or something. They were reversing. What I didn't realize was actually my friend's car that they had just stolen, and my two friends were on the pavement outside because they had taken their car. And then the guys got a fright because I was waving and I was on the phone, and they thought I was calling the police. So they came out and they were like, who are you calling? Who are you calling? Like, gun in my mouth. I'm trying to explain to them, like, it's my mother. Like, talk to her, you know? So it was
Jesus.
an experience. And then after that, I was like, yeah, like, I'm done. Like,
do you go back often?
I used to go back every year because like my mother and sister were still there, but they've just actually moved to Cyprus now after some recent events that have happened in the country. They also just sort of said, okay, like, it's a beautiful place. We love it. Like, if we could stay, we would stay. But just like my sister has also 2 little kids, and they were like, okay, doesn't make sense for us.
Yeah. I mean, the footage that comes out of there, including like truck robberies, like it's intense.
Yeah, I have a friend. He's like probably 7 or 8 different incidents with him, and he's like walking on the street and they've stolen his shoes, or he's been in a supermarket and they've come in with AK-47s, like literally blowing like the place up, and gun shells all are falling all around him. So like, the number of stories you hear, and the problem is there, like, people normalize it so much. It's just like part of their life, and then they'll say it's not so bad. And like, then you go home at night and you're actually like surrounded by like 2-3 meter high meter walls and fencing and alarm systems. And it's like you're literally living in a jail cell. You have people walking around your house with automatic weapons, checking that everything's okay. Fingerprints to get into your estate that you live in, and so it's just not like a place I wanted to be. And going to Cyprus, it's like the freest place on earth. Like, you walk in, you leave your phone on the bar, you forget it there, you go to the next place, you come back 2 hours later and you say, hey, I left my phone on the bar. It's there, hasn't moved. So like,
yeah, geez, I'm shocked about your story. I don't know if that would happen to me.
Yeah.
How I would react. Probably not very good, to be honest.
Yeah.
Now I understand. Thank you for explaining to me why you didn't go back to South Africa.
But I think it's weird, like, how people respond in these moments of situations where have extreme stress, because I think it's similar as well in startups. Like, you have these moments of extreme stress, and like how you're able to deal and tolerate with them as well has an influence. And I mean, like, I remember this moment vividly as well, because I sort of went into like a different state where I became extremely relaxed, and all my friends around me, because it was meant to be a party and people were arriving to come and see us, and my sister was there as well, and they locked us up in the like pantry that they had. And as guests were arriving, they were just putting them in the pantry while they were robbing the house. And I remember everybody coming in like shaken, like whatever, and like I felt like at that time like I needed to be really relaxed. And we were in the pantry and I was like, hey, Matthew, like, what's going on? Like, good to see you, man. Grab a drink. We've got some whiskey here. And I was like pouring drinks for everybody there, trying to like calm everybody down.
Yeah.
At the time, I was the only one that managed to keep and hold on to the cell phone. So we were able to call the police. And but just remember seeing like those sort of situations of like these extreme stress. Like, I equate them to sometimes of like building a startup where like you feel like there's like everything going around you is like absolute chaos. And like the only way to like go through those is just like take a step back, to be able to breathe, to be able to like calm yourself down. And I see similarities in the two as well, like the extremes.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I had to learn the hard way. Had a couple of health complications and so on. I had to learn the hard way that stress is a killer when it comes to businesses. How about you? You mentioned a bit of a health challenges.
Yeah. So definitely, like, it is a killer. I think from that perspective, for myself, like with the previous company now that we had raised some venture capital, and a lot of them was actually from friends as well that the money came. And we got to a point where we were, like, things weren't going well. We needed to shut things down, but we hadn't admitted it yet. And I sort of allowed stress to overtake in that situation, and I started to drink more because I was trying to deal with the stress in that way. And what ended up happening was, like, I went through a period where I wasn't eating well, I wasn't sleeping, I was just working all the time, drinking. My immune system had been depleted, and I ended up getting what's called shingles. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically it's like the adult version of chickenpox, which comes out, and normally when you're only about like 50 or 60, It's incredibly painful. Like it attacks your nervous system. You break out in like rashes. And a lot of people say they end up having suicidal thoughts because of the pain, because it is that extreme, attacking the nervous system. And like I went through this experience and I didn't even realize for the first 3-4 days, and you're supposed to go immediately when you find out and start treatment. So I also ended up having like this prolonged effect where it took like 3-4 months for the pain to subside. And then in the same time, like I ended up getting Hashimoto's disease, like my thyroid started attacking itself because of, and directly related to stress. And then at like some point I went to a doctor and like he started telling me all of this and the negative effects. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing, Andrew? It's like, sorry for saying that, but it's like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like it's absolutely meaningless. Like you have a little 4-year-old son, you have a wife, like you need to be there for them and you don't need stress to influence you in these ways. And I just sort of said, okay, like turning everything around. Like at that point I was like, okay, like I'm going to shut this company down. It's the right thing to do. Like it's not going to work. Like everybody signed up for it. And I think the conversation I had to have with my investor, like I remember it clearly because like one of the investors who invested in my company, he was like, at the time he called me, he's like, hey, I heard that you're raising money for your startup. He's like, I want to invest. And I was like, cool, like let's set up a call. I'll show you what we're doing. He's like, no, just tell me where to send the money. I was like, don't you want to even know what we're doing? He's like, no, like I believe in you. I trust you. Like I want to invest. So like that conversation for me with those founders and those friends, like having to tell them like we're going to shut this down, was like probably one of the most like intense feelings I've had, like going to sit down at a lunch and just sitting there and telling. I remember like afterwards, like I felt this like relief like throw through my body because I just turned around and said like, man, you've done incredibly well with what you've built so far. Like most startups don't get anywhere close to where you got. You lucked out on the market, like the timing, shut it down. Let us know when you're getting started again and we're going to invest in what's next. And like,
but I think that's very important. And you're also lucky to have a network so supportive and understanding in a sense.
Incredibly lucky.
Because not a lot of people do. And when they do get that investment from either angel investors or VCs, they're getting skinned alive at times by investors. Many horror stories. Yeah. Although I don't like, I'm an angel investor right now, and you know my ethos in the sense of investing is like the money part of it is the least important bit. The most important thing is to try to help and nurture startup founders and aspiring founders as much as possible.
Yeah.
You know, and if they have to fail, go through a failure, close down shop and start up later and my money is gone, then that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's like
you've been through it, you understand it.
Exactly.
I think that's what you need to look for in investors, was like those that understand the grind, they understand what goes into it, they understand the effort that needs to happen.
And how did I'm curious, how did you realize that these health issues were coming from stress? Was that something that doctors told you, or?
Yeah, it was. I think it was clear, obviously, like the stress perspective, but also like I was very fortunate to a good friend of my mother's. I was in South Africa at the time, and she's like, "Hey, my son had shingles, and like normally to get an appointment with this doctor is like 2 to 3 months." And he's like, "Tell him to come see me immediately. Like it's not normal at his age to be experiencing these symptoms." And so when I went to see him, he's sort of like incredible doctor. Like I spent a lot of money as well at the time. I think it was like €1,000 just on blood tests. And literally spent an hour with me, like going through each marker, like explaining what the impact is, insulin levels through the roof, like vitamin B levels depleted, like all of these sorts of signs are typical signals of stress being in influence on the body. And then when your immune system's that low, when you have these deficiencies in some of these key minerals and vitamins, then that's when like the autoimmune system becomes compromised, and actually like the attacking of the thyroid was coming from my stomach being in such a bad shape, and decided, okay, like this is it, it's done, like I'm closing down. I felt guilty, so I wanted to make sure like shutting down wasn't like a sign of me being weak and not wanting to put myself through the pain. So I was like, okay, I'm going to run a marathon. I'd never run more than 5 kilometers before. Like this was a decision. I said, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to prove to myself that I'm mentally strong, that I can like fight through the situation, and I'm going to focus then on my health and wellness. And I spent like for the beginning of the year, like training, eating really well. I've stopped drinking now, so I haven't been drinking since like December at some point, and been exercising 5-6 times a week, eating healthily. And I went to visit the doctor 6 months later, and he was like, whatever you're doing, like continue. Like I've never seen in all my years of medicine the turnaround that you've had. You've basically like reversed the symptoms of the Hashimoto disease by 5 years. And if you continue, you're not going to have an issue there. Shingles as well, like pain has resided, the focus, and it was just sort of like immediately as that stress went, like I could focus on myself and like getting better, and like the difference is night and day.
That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that you turn it around quite quickly, and I really hope that it just disappears completely. When did you start getting all of these symptoms? How long ago was it?
It was actually almost this time last year.
Really?
Almost exactly this time last year, because I was at a conference at How to Web. I arrived home and like I took off my t-shirt, and my wife is like, "What the hell is on your back?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then that's where I like realized that I had the shingles, and so almost exactly a year from.
So okay, so this is quite recent. So and it's basically this last business that you closed down that we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the business like? What were you doing? What were the stressful bits of it?
Yeah. So basically, like what the company did was we enabled researchers to analyze and conduct research more effectively. And through our platform, you could upload user interviews. We automatically transcribed them. We enabled you to create clips that you could share with your team easily. And then we focused on AI and automation to be able to detect questions and answers and provide summaries. When we started the business, it started as something completely different. It started as a browser extension that enabled you to bring qualitative and quantitative data together. So you could take a screenshot from a mixed panel report and you could attach it to different parts of products and services. And when we launched it, we had a lot of interest. So we had like 700 signups from Product Hunt launch, like Adidas, Envision, good startups, good companies, a lot of interest. Absolutely nobody used the product. Like they all signed up, but activation was like absolute crap. And then we were like, what do we do now? So as you do, user research, you speak to customers, you try to understand like, why did you come to us in the beginning? What resonated with the message? What was missing from the product perspective? And where was that gap? And what resoundingly, like everybody expected our product to be a research repository. And they wanted to be able to analyze and share interviews being the biggest part of the research that they did.
Right.
And we did, as founders should do, follow the market and follow the feedback, which I think is a big mistake now in retrospect. But we built a product for this, and then we started to see good traction. But what we failed to do at that moment in time was really assess the market and try to understand, okay, what competition was out there and how big was this market? Was this going to be like a venture-backed business that we could build, because that's what everybody had signed up for. That's what the team had. That's what investors had. And we came up against some very strong competition as well. So companies that had been in the market for years, like our biggest competitor had raised 65 million in like the heat of the fundraising environment. And once we started getting traction, we were finding it difficult to get traction with our ideal customer profile, because like user researchers do an insane amount of research when it comes to researching a product for themselves. We'd get on calls, spreadsheets out, like, do you have this feature? Do you have this feature? Do you have this feature? And we couldn't compete on feature parity. And so we said, okay, like we're not going to compete on feature parity. Let's differentiate completely. Excuse me. And we said, okay, let's focus on AI and automation. And that's where we started doing the summarization and these sorts of things. And again, we started to see progress in that direction. We made the switch because churn was an issue, not being able to acquire the ICP. So we wanted to try a different segment and audience.
How much at this stage before pivoting into AI and automation? How much ARR, MRR were you making?
At that stage, like very little, like around 1,000, 2,000.
Right. Okay.
So we ended up MRR. So we ended up at around 6,000 MRR before we decided to shut down the business. We grew like within 2 to 3 months to that, from the 1,500 to around 6,000. And we'd focus in on AI and automation ChatGPT launches, and pretty much every product, every competitor out there adds it as a feature set to theirs. It becomes like table stakes for everybody. And we just sort of said, okay, like at that moment, it's like it's only a matter of time before the competitors do the same and introduce it into their product and things. So what became the key differentiator that we were going to focus on became like table stakes and a commodity for products and services. And at that point, then we just sort of said, okay, like it's going to be difficult to raise further round for this business with the unit economics and the metrics that we had. We did good things. So we had around 15,000 users on the platform. We ended up getting our payback period around to 5 to 6 months. But churn was a very big issue for the business. And I think for that, when you're in a SaaS business and you're trying to raise, it's like really ironic that I have a podcast around churn and retention. But
hey, you learned a lot. And at the end of the day, you can highlight the challenges as well. And fundamentally, that's quite important rather than just telling people how to decrease churn.
Exactly. But if I had to go back in time, what I mentioned around the feedback in the beginning is that I would have obsessed a lot more in the beginning around the problem that we were trying to solve rather than the solution that we had catered to. And rather than the solution that the market was telling us, because we moved away from the original problem space and into a new problem space that we didn't know enough about, or we weren't really passionate about it either. And that ended up sort of being the killer, because not knowing what was out there and just building for the sake of building.
You know, as you're mentioning this, I'm realizing that we're in very different worlds from the perspective of what you build. In going into SaaS, attending events like this, SaaS Talk and such, you see how everyone's trying to differentiate, to put an accent on, oh, I'm doing this better, I'm building this product like this, this is something completely innovating, groundbreaking, and so on, which you have to in this ecosystem. For us, it was completely different, though. Nikki and I started the business because we wanted to continue to work with each other and build cool shit, in the sense, right?
Yeah.
And we basically, got everyone on the bus. We got a good team and we were starting to build stuff. But because we were part of this Atlassian ecosystem marketplace, it does matter to build value, right, in your products. But a lot more than that, it matters positioning, marketing, partnerships, and a lot of other things. So we didn't really have to have the secret sauce in terms of a product. Because there were all of these other components. So our products were quite good, but not innovative, right? Just project management related tools and building flashier interface and a nicer experience for the customer. But they didn't have it's this revolutionary thing that we're building better than anyone and so on. But what we've done really well is we had a really good team, a very balanced across marketing and development, and we were partnering up. We were keyword stuffing on the marketplace, which it's different than on Google, where that's not really possible. You have to invest a lot in SEO. But listening to you talk about this, I realize I can't just be preaching bring great people on because they're gonna solve your product problem for you. They may, but in a sense, if you're completely off track with something, it might be unfixable. Right?
I think it's different though as well. The business we're building, we could have continued to build a business there, and we could have got to maybe 1, 2, 3 million in ARR. I think the difference was that wasn't what everybody signed up for, and I think that becomes the problem. I think that's most of the time as well. And it was recently at How to Web and at an investor session, and somebody asked one of the investors how many teams come to you that are actually VC backable businesses, and he was maybe 10 to 15% of startups that end up pitching me have an opportunity where it's a VC backable business. And the sad thing is that good businesses end up never making it because there's this obsession with raising venture capital and going after a market that's potentially not there. So I think there was the case that we could have said, yes, let's continue to try and make this work and grow it, like trying to shrink the team, but it wasn't what anybody signed up for, what we wanted as a team at the time. And for me, I think like the biggest asset we have is time, and like for us working on something that nobody is really like that motivated, and it was going to be a struggle, was going to be difficult, or wasn't going to be easy to make it, but we could have done it. It wasn't the outcome that anybody wanted. So like even if it did become somewhat of a small success to some degree, the time that we were going to invest and the effort that we were going to go to get there, like I felt could have been done and spent better somewhere else. And so that was sort of like the discussions and the decision making that went into it as well.
And what were some of the stressful bits of it? Like what were those components that got you to the super bad state health wise?
So I think like one of the things is starting out with the right co-founders. So I started the business actually by myself to begin with, and then I tried to bring on a co-founder some part during the journey, who ended up leaving as well towards the end of the business. And I think that was a stressful moment because and we're still very good friends. We didn't leave on any bad terms. It was more just like differences of opinions, and we still speak to this day. But like I think not having a really strong co-founder to work with for me was like a big issue, because I think it's incredibly difficult building startups. And in previous companies, I had really good co-founders with me that you can lean on, you can speak to. So I think that was difficult because like through all the difficult moments, there was no one really, even though we had like fully transparent, everybody knew what was happening in the company at any time, like not everybody fully grasped the problems and the issues that were there. And I think like that was like difficult for me dealing with that by myself, I'd say. And then like when things aren't going well and you have like, you're building a good team and you see like you have this great culture that you're trying to develop, but you almost see like the end where it's going to happen, and you're trying to avoid that as opposed to looking towards like to the success. And I think that's a very bad place to be when you're focused on not dying instead of focused on succeeding. And I think at some point there was like that switch when in the beginning you started with all this optimism in the world and you're like, yes, we're going to make this, like this is it. And like the only thing you can think about is making it. When you start to doubt things, I think that's when like the switch happens, and that's probably like a very dangerous path to be on, where you're like trying to avoid death as opposed to trying to succeed. And I think for me, that's when like the stress really kicks in, and it's like you're only thinking about like not dying, which is like
if you're focusing on not dying instead of focusing on living, you're in a bad place. Yeah. Interesting. What did you do in school? What was your major, or what were you?
Yeah, so when I finished school, I never studied. Like my mother said to me, if you want to go to university, you can. Mm-hmm. If you don't, you're on your own. So pretty much when I left school at 18, left the house, got a job, and just started working and getting experience that way. So I never ever studied, but spent obviously a lot of time doing personal studies and educating myself in different areas and aspects.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, do you have any siblings?
Yes.
You do? Oh, yes, you told me your sister that moved to Cyprus as well. And what's the best that you've traveled a bit, I suppose, because you're in Dublin here. I see you as a person that goes and networks and so on. What's the one thing, because I don't know much about Cyprus, but I'm curious, what's the one thing that you really like about Cyprus?
Safety. I think like for me, it's probably the safest place on the planet, or at least one of them. You have like good weather. It sometimes gets extremely hot, too hot, but for the most part, like we have really nice beaches. It's more of a laid back lifestyle, which is something I enjoy in some moments, and other moments I really dislike. But yeah, I think it's that element of safety, is that like you're in a place where like you have almost zero worries of anything happening to you from like a crime perspective or anything like that. And I think that for me, it's like a big contrast.
And do you rent an office somewhere, or do you work from home?
Work from home. So I started working from home when I joined Hotjar. They're a fully remote business. And then I sort of got the bug and I was like, hey, this is it for me. I'm not turning things around. And I'm fortunate though that I have like a very good setup at home where a full office, home studio, like did soundproofing and have a similar setup with lighting and everything in the office. So for me, I have like this place where I switch off when I go into there and like a do not disturb sort of thing. And then I can walk out the door and be at home and like spend time with my wife and my son as well. So yeah.
I'll send you a link. I bought this wooden on air with LEDs inside. It looks really cool. So you can put it, and it has a switch, and it can be on batteries as well. You can put it on top of your office door and say on air. You go in, it's like, okay, I shouldn't disturb him.
I need something like, sometimes I need to like put on mute and like, I'm recording an episode. Hopefully somebody hears me and sorry. Yeah. So, but yeah. No, it is good. I think there's some drawbacks sometimes for that, but like there's nothing beats like my son just coming in the office and like handing me a drawing that he's just done at school and look what I did. Like you miss those interactions, I think, when you're at an office, and he's at this age now where I know my personality. If I was at the office, I'd be coming home extremely late. I like wouldn't be seeing them much. So I think for me, like it really suits the way I like to work, to still be able to get the benefit of being close to family, but then being able to work late at nights and still like being there and being able just to roll over into bed and have dinner with them, have breakfasts, like have lunches together, which is time I otherwise wouldn't have had.
So it sounds like you've been working remote for quite a while from home, which you enjoy. I'm the same. Like I've made my studio and everything. I love being in my own space.
Yeah.
Talking about working remotely and stuff. What was the biggest team size that you managed? And was that at
remotely? So probably at Hotjar is around 10 people. Avril was a similar size as well when we decided to shut things down. But yeah, around 10 people, a remote business. Before, like previously, around 20 to 30 people, closer to 30.
Okay. And what has been the biggest challenge in working with larger teams? Like
in a remote environment or in general?
No, in general. You mentioned 20, 30. When you're at that stage, what are some of the challenges? And was it completely flat, or did you had
no, we had
under
managers as well and things like that. So I think I can't say anything like from a managerial perspective, like I felt there's ever been any big issues or problems that needed to be resolved. I think always like the resounding one is probably around alignment and the frameworks that you choose to do that. I think a lot of times like people will look to tools to solve like problems internally when it comes to process. And I think most of the time, fundamentally, it comes down to people rather than the tools themselves. And like you can try every task management system under the platform, but like if you haven't got the right mindsets and approach to wanting to be able to use these tools, they all end up failing and they end up not working. And the same thing with alignment frameworks like OKRs or V2MOM, which is the Salesforce one. I think that for me is probably the biggest issue I've seen, like working with different teams, is like getting the alignments. And then you want to work in an environment where you have autonomy and you want people to be empowered, but getting the right tools in place to get to the point where you can have that autonomy. I think that takes time and it takes repetition. It takes making mistakes. I think at Hotjar in the early days, we tried all the different frameworks as we were growing and as we're trying to keep that alignment. And especially when you go through these moments of like hyper growth, that becomes very difficult. Like just a basic thing, like who our ideal customer profile is, like that might change 3-4 times in the space of a year. And it might be different between different departments because everybody's speaking to customers at different times and different stages. And there's all these little things like this in the business where alignment starts to break down. And even though you might be leading a team of 20 people or 12 people, you still need to be aligned with all the other team leaders on the team and being able to bring that together. And I think that takes time in startups to get right. And it's like always a temporary process, what I found. It's never something permanent that works. And I think that everybody expects to have a permanent solution that's going to work throughout the stage and as you're growing. But people need to be comfortable with the fact that just not everything fits at every stage. And you need to find what works for now, deal with it and get on with it. And I think that's like been like probably the issue. If I say now, like working with different teams has been like that, it will be like, oh, we introduced a framework now. Oh, we have to learn this. And then there's all the ums and ahs. And then like by the time that starts to work a bit, like it doesn't fit the company anymore and we need to start to rework it again. And it always gets like, we're changing again. But like, that change is necessary. And I think like teams as a whole need to realize like, okay, if we're going to do something, like, let's all buy into it. Let's get it because it's going to help us stay aligned. And let's realize that this is an experiment. This is going to change. I was listening to a talk the other day, and I can't remember who it was now to credit, but he highlighted this as well as one of those issues. And it really resonated with me because I had seen it play out in a few different places.
Likewise, I was going to say that I've seen it. I don't think I've ever not seen it in a team, this behavior in a sense. And I'm guilty of bringing to our team new processes, new tooling, and without having backing, and that causes more delays and more sluggish implementation than people realize. If you have everyone on board and it's like, yeah, screw it, let's give it a try, let's hack it around and see if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If people have that attitude, and I've experienced that as well, and it's so fulfilling to see people trying stuff and hacking things around. But if that doesn't happen and people are resistant to a specific tool and so on, and you didn't help them see the value that this could potentially bring if it works, then you just, like you said, you wind up spending 6 months trying to implement something, and when you start seeing results, the company's already
changed and
past that. And I've even seen that with our tools, right? Where a customer, the person that's advocating for the tool to be used because they see value in it, does a sloppy job at getting people excited about trying it, or getting them on board and giving it a chance. And by the time people forcefully start using the tool, they don't need it anymore.
They don't need it, And I think that's a lot of SaaS business. One of the reasons for churn as well is like when people start out, they have a specific problem, an issue, and as they grow, like within their journey with that product or service, their sophistication level grows and their needs grow with that as well. Like they've solved their problem with your solution in the beginning, and like the most successful companies then have ways to expand use cases and to get them to use additional products and services within their portfolio. The ones that end up having issues are the ones that can't grow with those customers and don't realize that, okay, like the problem that somebody came to you on day one is a completely different problem that they have at day 365, and being able to anticipate those needs and work with them is like a very big sign that you've got something that's going to be sticky.
Yeah, true. I'm curious, why did you leave Hotjar?
Yeah. Hotjar at the time, so Hotjar was super supportive as well. When I said to them I wanted to start something, they sort of said, okay, stay here as long as you want. Like you can work on it in your time, and when you're ready, you can get going. And for me, like I started working on the side. I lasted a month, and then like I started realizing that I was just obsessed with what I was doing, and I was spending more time and energy and focus there, and I wasn't really doing my job justice that I had at the time. And I felt that, okay, like to be fair to the company, I needed to basically leave and say, okay, I'm going to go full time and focus on it. But super supportive, like still speak to everybody regularly there. Chatted actually, as I mentioned, to the founders, potentially looking to start something together. But
you must be a very, very nice guy, because all I'm hearing is the fact that you have a very supportive network that is willing to invest and have patience with you and give you the again. It sounds like you're either a very nice guy or you're attracting the right people in your network.
I'd say I'm very lucky. I'd say that. I don't know. I think it's like, for me, when I get into something, I go all into things. And especially like at Hotjar, like I treated it as my own when I joined the company. Like I went all in, and I was fortunate in the sense that like because I had that established relation with David, like I was trusted with a lot of different interesting and key projects throughout the company. So I got to experience a lot of the growth and work on some of the most challenging problems that we had. So I think when it came time to say, okay, like now I want to do my own thing, I think the way actually David introduced me to his mother for the first time when we were there to meet up, they were like, this is Andrew. We have him on borrowed time. He's going to go off and start his own thing again, and we're lucky to have him. And I was like, geez, like, what does that say for my future, this company, if you see me as borrowed time? But it really was like he understood like who I was. And I think that was also one of the key things that the company did really well, is just like they understood who they were hiring, and they understood like their characters and nature. And like for some that needed the freedom and flexibility and to go on and like tackle problems and take things, they gave that to them. And for others that needed more focus and direction, they gave that. And that's what created like a really amazing culture and company as we started to grow.
No, that's really good when that happens. Before Jigsaw, when I started at the previous company that I was working for, I got this exact same support, which was like, hey, we know that you've been an entrepreneur for your entire life. We're not going to force you to stay, and we're going to be supportive on when you want to start doing stuff. We're going to support you with whatever. And oddly enough, that was the company that I spent the most years at, just like 5 years.
I think it makes a huge difference. I think it's a huge missed opportunity when people don't want to hire founders. I think that's one thing Hotjar actually did, was like in the early days, they hired a few different founders who had started companies in the past. And just because I think of like the attitude and the mentality and the drive that comes, like there's different momentum that comes, I think, from a founder versus other maybe earlier stage employees. And I think not leveraging it because you're scared that person's going to leave is like a big mistake, because the amount of impact and drive that they can have in the short period of time, even if it's like 6 months, it's a year, if it's 2 years, like probably it's like 2-3x like what somebody else might do at an earlier stage. And so I think those are the sort of things I think that Hotjar realized really early on, and it was great to see. And it's definitely something for myself as well, like hiring and looking to start a new company as well. It's definitely like top, if I can attract and bring like a founder to join, like I think that's a special place. And it's also fun to be around like fellow founders as well, and who understand the challenges, who can have real conversations with, and like who've maybe been through a similar situation before, and it's like really can empathize with what you're going through as a founder as well in that business.
Yeah, completely agree. It's the being an entrepreneur in a sense, in an organization. What was the biggest? What do you see as not the biggest, the hardest period of your career and professional life? Was it last year with the whole closing down and illness, or anything else?
No, I think it was definitely last year. The focus, I think it's like as you get older as well, and the more you do it, I think the more, even though like you get more comfortable with failure, failure I think for me has a greater weight, and it's like I felt that okay, like you had all this experience, like this should have been it. You spent all this amount of effort and time trying to build something again, and you failed. And you've even made some mistake that you've made in the past, which for me is like a no-go. I think like that's probably, there's nothing that's been more difficult. And I think that's one of my worries actually starting something again, is that needing to manage and deal with that pressure that I put on myself. Because like, if you ask anybody else, nobody really gives a shit like how many times I failed or what I do. I think like we all think that people care more about what we do than they actually do, because and then nobody really cares about you. The only one is like maybe your close family and friends, and even then like nobody's counting on the failure side. And
and I think that what I've noticed is people appreciate more your wins than they care about your losses.
Yes,
in a sense of judgmental wise, right? People do care about hearing the stories of losing, especially in something like Misfit Founders, where you can kind of relate to some of these stories and learn from them. But when it comes to judging a person in this entrepreneurial world, wins have a lot more of a weight into how you judge than losses.
I mean, I was thinking about this last night, like, because obviously it's different now coming to a conference, like after you've just closed down a startup and people, what are you doing at the moment? It's like, again, it's like one of those things, it's like, oh, what am I doing at the moment? So, like I'm focusing on my podcast now, which is something I wanted to, but like, it's a weird feeling. And the other thing I noticed as well, like people say, I'm sorry to hear that. And like for me, this is something that's like, it feels a bit weird for people to tell me I'm sorry to, even though it's coming from a good place and I understand it. Like, I would much rather someone say like, congratulations, like, you're out and now what's next sort of thing, as opposed to like this like feeling sorry for you, because there's nothing really to feel sorry about. But because people say that, then you start to question like, should I feel sorry for myself in this situation? But it's like trying to all the time like fight with these internal biases that you have to say, okay, like, yes, failure is normal, failure is good, I'm learning from this. Like, nobody really cares as much. I think I shouldn't care anyway what other people's think. And like, the more you try to tell yourself that, like, there's still always these moments where doubt creeps in and this imposter syndrome arises, and like you forget everything you've done in the past and you just look at what you've done at this moment in time and you think that's who you are. And like you associate so much of your identity with like the startup that you build, that you think like you are the failure. And I think for me, this is like the biggest thing, is like, how can I separate like the two and get better at doing that and get better at like exercising this muscle. And then like when somebody comes to me and says like, hey, I've just shut down my startup, I'm like, congratulations. Like, what's next? Like, what you're up to now? Like, how much did you learn from it? Must have been an incredible experience learning. And I think like trying to switch my mindset as well around this, and to focus on like, yes, like I failed, but I learned an incredible amount. There was a lot of success in that failure as well, and trying to focus on that as opposed to just like beating yourself up and like, as we love to do, because I think like that's another thing that we're incredibly good at, is being self-critical, but like very bad, I think, at like acknowledging the good that gets done. And I see it from all my entrepreneurial friends. It's like they've just achieved something amazing in their business, and then the immediate like next day they're looking at like what's going wrong and the biggest, baddest thing that's happening in their life. But very rarely do people sit back and say like, let's celebrate this moment. And like, it's actually people on the outside that need to force the entrepreneurs and say like, take the day off, like go and celebrate this win.
And I think it in general, we don't normalize failures. And in a sense, that's also what I want to do with Misfit Founders that's why a lot of us feel super guilty and beat ourselves up when we fail. Especially when you're young, when you see all of these flashy images of what it means to be a founder, an entrepreneur, and when you fail, you just feel like crap, because you feel like you're an outcast in a sense, because it's like, well, look at all of these success stories and here I am failing. There's something wrong with me. I don't belong in this in this world. Maybe I should just go and get a job or something like that.
And you start thinking about it. But I think like the weird thing for me as well, I've also realized, is like even throughout, like every time I've failed, like I've failed into a bigger success, like a bigger, more successful path. And each time like this has happened in my career, I've had these like step changes, like in salary and so forth. So like I've gone on to work at different companies, but like each time I've lost out on like 2-3 years worth of revenue, like earning peanuts, building your own startup. But then in the next company maybe I went to go work at, I was earning like 3-4x of what I was earning in the previous role. And I think like these sorts of things as well are like career accelerants that you don't realize that end up happening as a result. And in the time they feel very bad, and then you might look at peers who stayed in the same company, the same place, that have maybe progressed from like a senior to a principal or whatever it is. And like, you step in then and to become a director or a more senior level in a company. And I think that's also like something you forget to acknowledge as well, is that like this experience doesn't go unnoticed, and like it lands you in better places without you realizing it. And I've looked back at times and say, okay, yes, I spent that time, but I call it school fees. Like I paid my school fees, I learned, and like now I'll be able to get a better job because I have this degree in my history.
Exactly. And I've always seen it, like even with Jigsaw, when Nikki and I, my partner and I started Jigsaw, and when we got seed investment, when we started growing it a bit, we still have that uncertainty. You still think, is this going to be successful? Am I going to fail? I always kept on saying to Nikki, look, worst case scenario, and we need to shut down. We're definitely going to get really good jobs, because look at what we've achieved. Even though you shut it down, we've achieved all of these things. Who wouldn't want to hire you for decent money?
And that's the thing, like what's the worst thing that can happen is like
Yeah.
you get another job. Like,
Exactly.
like a lot of times, like when I speak to people and they're like, oh, I'm thinking about starting something, or like I'm a bit nervous to take the leap, and like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, it's like, you're going to try something, it's not going to work. That experience is going to like have grown you to a certain extent. You're going to get another job with that experience under your belt. Like, it's not, the risky thing for me is not doing things. And people say this all the time, but I really believe it as well. It's like not trying things, like you just end up having regrets. And yeah, my wife will probably say something different. But yeah.
What are you looking up for, like in the next immediate period? Is it the podcast? Is it that's what excites you and you're super keen in?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, the podcast at the moment, I want to just continue to grow the audience, continue to build what we built. But I'm like actively looking at like what I want to do next now and figure out. And it's definitely be building something again. I've decided that now internally. So, but I'm deliberately taking my time now. I'm fortunate in a position that I can take my time and figure out what's next. But I want to be really like thoughtful in what I decide, because I know like if things work out, it's a minimum 10-year investment in whatever's next. And I want to make sure it's something that I'm going to enjoy doing for the next 10 years. And I think like if I had to prioritize one thing, it's going to be having fun. Like at this stage, like whatever I build next, I want to be having fun doing it. It's like the opportunity needs to be big, but I need to be making sure that I'm having fun while I'm doing it.
That's a really important realization, because I do see people that continue to be grumps in their 40s, 50s, building businesses, trying things, exiting successfully or not, and continuing down the same path and realizing I didn't like that. I didn't like the stress level. I didn't like that I became what I became, and I want to change in the next business. That is very important towards, living a healthy life and having a culture of well-being at work as well, and in your business. You said you internally decided you're going to pursue something else. So does that mean that Misfit Founder is the first place where you officially announced that you're going to eventually start something new?
Might be, yes. I'll definitely this time around want to start talking about it more openly as well, and gather feedback as well as we're going along. I think I shared the story of shutting down the company, and I think that resonated with a lot of people, which is really cool. A lot of amazing founders like reached out, sent me messages, like told me of their horror stories. That was incredible just to hear from that perspective. So I think I want to do the same approach now, like as I'm doing, because I think there's definitely like that imposter syndrome that creeps in, like talking about some of these feelings and emotions that I'm going through now while I'm thinking about what's next. Is like, there's a lot of other founders, and I'm sure going through the same moments, especially now in this economic climate that we're going through, with a lot of VC-backed companies needing to shut down. And there's going to be a lot of founders in the same situation where they're like questioning themselves. Are they meant to be here? Can they make it? It's like, maybe they should just pack it in and try something else completely different. And like, I'm going through all of these thoughts at the same time, but I'm trying to fight through them, because I know like what I love doing and what I really enjoy doing, and I want to like keep pushing. So definitely probably the first place I'm talking about this now, but I definitely want to start talking more about it and getting feedback from the market as we go along, and being transparent as well about it.
Yeah, well, you just described the plot of Misfit Founders at the end of the day. This entire show is around uncovering those feelings and those situations that we go through, the hardships that we go through as founders, and sharing with others. I have an ending ceremony where I ask 3 flash questions, and then I also have a gift for you, like a thank you token for being a guest on the show. So question number 1, what is a quote that you live by?
Quote that I live by. A quote that I used to live by that has changed, but is Charles Bukowski's Go All the Way. I don't know if you're familiar with the poem. I think it's called All In. And there's a really good YouTube clip on this. It's like, go all the way. And what he talks about is like, if you're going to do something, like go all the way, go all in. And it's a little bit extreme, because like, even if you have to lose like wives and girlfriends, and like go all the way, even if you have to forget like about everything around you and just go all in. And I think like that resonated a lot with me in my earlier days. It's definitely changed, but it's definitely one that's stuck around with me quite a lot. And the other quote though that doesn't change is like, embrace uncertainty. And this actually was said to me by an Accelerate founder when at the time I was working for a company called Shark Energy Drink, and really well paid job, like probably one of the best at my age in the island where I was at the time. And we went to a startup competition, like randomly. We picked 3 words out of a bucket, me and 2 friends, and we ended up winning the competition or coming second for it. And we thought this was a great idea, this business idea that we've just like randomly on a weekend decided 3 things. On Monday, we applied to the accelerator program. Like 2 weeks later, they accepted us and we packed up our bags. We quit our jobs. We flew to Copenhagen, the 3 of us. We arrive. The first meeting we have with the guy, he's like, "We love your team. You guys are amazing. Your idea is absolutely shit." And we all just sitting there like, what, is this guy serious now? Like, you've literally like got us out, packed our bags, quit our jobs, left wives, girlfriends at home, and like we're here. And then he's like, you got to embrace uncertainty. Like you're building startups, you've got to embrace uncertainty. You got to get with it. And I think that's always like stuck with me since then.
That's awesome. That story, I enjoy that story because I'm like that as well. I just take action on the spot, decide, and so on. And sometimes it pays out, sometimes it doesn't, right? So for me as well, I'm also lucky that Nikki's a bit more paced, and she's like, "Oh, no, slow down. Let's calculate. This." A book that changed your life. Great.
Yeah, the title of this I can find out off, so I can tell you as well after the show. But basically, the book was uncovering the injustice in minorities, but really focusing on data from a data perspective. And it looked at sort of all of the differences, like when we talk about like male and female in the society, but it really like talked about it from a data perspective and sort of showed, okay, like if you look at Hollywood movies, like only 10% are female-led actresses versus 90% male. If we look at things like accidents that happen for policemen and policewomen in the environment, it's like majority of accidents are happening with policewomen because the gear that is built is only built for males, or it's modeled around a male. Or back in the day when they used to do experimentation, not experimentation, but research when it came to like different types of medicine that were being produced, like the samples were always more like geared towards males or maybe a certain demographic and segment. And I think growing up for me growing up in South Africa, like at the end of apartheid, and like seeing sort of the different injustices and the way that the government tried to reverse that with affirmative action at the time, like I didn't make sense to me because I felt like the best person should be the one that gets the job, or the best person should be the one that gets there. But I think when there's been such an injustice in the system that the best person maybe didn't have that opportunity to get that job, and like it just really changed my thinking around like how to deal with these situations and within the work and within the environment. And like I think is yes, the best person should get the job, but also you should try and weight the pipeline that comes through so that you're getting an even distribution of the right types of people and the right distribution, so that it's not just, okay, those that were fortunate to go to the right school at the right time that make the application are the ones that get through to the end. And I think that just really changed my perspective on the way I thought about some of these things, which is amazing.
That's very powerful, and completely on board with that. And I have to argue with people all the time because a lot of people have the attitude of, no, it should be the right person, right? It should be the best person for the job.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who that is. But again, you're right. The pipeline is not right. Yeah.
And I think it's also another different perspective is like, what are minorities as well from their perspective? So like, I'm a white male. I have got no right to talk to these topics, but there are other white males from different countries that are way less advantaged than maybe certain females in other markets because of the environment that they've been in, the environment that they've grown up in. And I think like we need to understand that as well and understand where people are coming from, not just look at the color or the race or the gender. It's really like you can be a minority in different places, and like feel like, and realizing just looking at the person, what their background is, what opportunities they had. And like, I think it's more around what opportunities did that individual have versus another individual, and then how can you sort of bring equilibrium to those opportunities as opposed to like a color of a skin or a gender. And I think that's what the book highlighted as well a lot, is that there's a lot of instances in society where these injustices, if you want to call them that, but just having data to be able to back it up and understand it, I think was really, really interesting.
That makes sense. And the last one is, what's a good habit that you advocate for?
Exercise.
Exercise. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, I mentioned to you at the start, I'm training for a marathon now at the moment. And I think for me, like, it's one of the biggest stress relievers. Like, I'll go out for a long run. Like, I have all the time just to think about, let my mind wander. And I always come back. I find some of the most creative thoughts I have are when I'm like my most tired, like deep into like a 1 hour or 2 hour run. So I think definitely for me, that is like a game changer that's I always need to have as part of my habits, and something that I lost when I got into that moment of stress. And I think it's a bad habit that most founders do, is like, as soon as things get a little bit stressful, the thing we do is we dive more into the work instead of like taking a step back and actually doing the things that are going to decrease that stress, give us that clarity of thought, and to be able to operate at a higher level. We end up just drilling ourselves and digging our holes deeper, and then not being in a position where we can actually think straight.
Yeah. I advocate for exercising. That if someone asks me that, that's the first thing that I say. And you know, interestingly enough, a lot of the founders that I had guests have said exercise.
Yeah,
it's very important for not just for your health, but for your mental well-being, especially as a founder that constantly stresses about things.
It's one of the things that's difficult to get into, like, but once you get into it and you're hooked, like, you can create a good, healthy habit around it. It's normally like that initial like start and the momentum, and there's like first month or 2 months, but once you start to see results, once you start to understand how you feel, like, you don't want to give up that feeling.
Yeah.
The book was Invisible Woman.
Invisible Woman. Okay.
Really, really good.
Perfect. We'll add that in. And again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, stranger, that I just met an hour ago outside this building at SaaS Talk. But no, I feel that I learned so much about you in this session. You've been through a lot, and it takes grit and resilience to continue with the same level of excitement and also maturity to look at things from a different lens and think about your future in a more positive way. So like I commend where you are in your career, and I wish one day I'll get there. I'm still a bit of a grump here and there, and then sometimes I'm like, I quit, but yeah, I carry on. I think I get a lot of inspiration from conversations like the ones with you today. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. And it's like really good random chance, and I met you. Yeah, like really excited to see where this podcast goes as well, because I think the love and energy that you're pouring into it, like the little details like this, and I think it's amazing. So thank you so much.